Had a blast covering the district attorney's race here in the city of Philadelphia. We've had 5 of the candidates on thus far, and here is the 6th one to join us for the semester. On the line with us right now is Rich Negrin, one of the Democratic candidates of the 7 in the Philadelphia district attorney race. Rich, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate you joining us today. So first things first, you were the 3rd Democrat to enter the race. You decided to join when Seth Williams was still, at that time, seeking a 3rd term. So first thing is, 1, how long did it take you to decide you wanted to seek this office? And 2, was it a difficult decision to decide you wanted to take on Seth Williams at the time?
Yeah, the timing is always a difficult choice. I started my career in the DA's office 21 years ago, so I love the office, and it's something that I thought about for some time. And it was really just kind of watching the embarrassment and the corruption and the controversy that he brought to the office that really expedited my timing. And I just couldn't stand by and kind of watch what he was doing to the office. And I want to get back there to make a difference and turn the office around.
And my question is, too, that so you talked about you were not happy with the way the office was going under Seth Williams' leadership. If you overall had to grade his tenure as a district attorney in Philadelphia, do you think he made some progressive reforms at all, or what would you grade him?
I think he talked a good game. I think he did some good things around the edges, around the charging unit. I think he talked about the vertical prosecution thing and really started the beginning, early steps of some of that stuff. So I'm not going to just denigrate everything he did. But quite frankly, the damage that you do, the integrity piece and the public corruption piece is really a game changer. It really clouds and blankets everything. So even minor administrative accomplishments are left in the dust when you really destroy the most important asset that the office has, and that is the trust that it has with the public and all the stakeholders.
Certainly trust was an issue, and that's why I think many voters in the city of Philadelphia wanted Seth Williams to not seek another term. But do you think he was a progressive district attorney?
I think he talked about being a progressive district attorney, but I don't think he was in actuality. He talked about reforms, and I think there was some hope around those things when he came into office. But he took the very same old stance on the death penalty. He actually sued the governor to impose it, and it didn't support the moratorium, and took in many ways a heavy-handed approach around folks that were obviously exonerated and my work on the Pennsylvania Innocence Project showed me, whether it was the Anthony Wright case or what you're seeing with the juvenile lifers, that Seth and the office, and ultimately he had the final say, took very old-fashioned 1950s perspectives on all of those things. So I wouldn't call that reform-minded.
I had the opportunity to see you speak at the Millennial Town Hall about a week or 2 ago when all the candidates were there. It was an excellent forum, and specifically me being a millennial living in the city of Philadelphia, I know I get to vote in this election. I was very pleased to see all the candidates there. And something that stuck out to me I wanted to ask you about. In the closing statement from Larry Krasner, he mentioned, again, trying to brand himself as the true progressive in the race, saying how he is the outsider. Obviously, he was not a prosecutor, but he was branding himself as the one who's kind of changed the direction of the race to the left. I want you to comment on what you think of those comments that he made. And also, he didn't mention you by name, but in his closing statements, he mentioned about him being a real progressive and kind of touting the fact that he didn't have the FOP endorsement. And it seemed like he was almost proud about that. And we know you have the FOP endorsement, so I'd like you to expand upon that.
Yes, look, the district attorney has to work with our police officers. You work hand in hand. So, Larry has made a career out of attacking police, attacking prosecutors, attacking victims of crime and rape cases, right? That's who he is. There's nothing wrong with that. We work in an adversarial system. We need good criminal defense lawyers. Larry is one of those good criminal defense lawyers. He's been doing it for 30 years. He can talk a great game. I'm not a progressive candidate. I'm a progressive leader. I've been the managing director for the city. I've run progressive programs helping our most vulnerable populations. I've been the one who's done something on reentry and hired former offenders into the city of Philadelphia, into my departments. So he can brand himself, and that's great. All of us have an opportunity to do that. But if you look at our record, you see what I've done. I don't just have the requisite prosecutorial experience, which I think you need to have in order to have the credibility to run the office. You can't attack the office your entire career and then ask those people to follow you. They're not going to follow him. That's not the way it works. You need to have that prosecutorial pastoral experience and the management experience that I have. The FOP is a good example. Every single candidate sought the endorsement of the Guardian Civic League, our black law enforcement officers. I'm the one that got it. I'm the one that didn't just get the FOP, that got the Guardians, that got the Black Law Enforcement Officers Association, that got the Latino Law Enforcement Officers Association. That's evidence of kind of who I am. Those four groups, by the way, have never agreed on anything, and I've gotten them to agree on my candidacy for a reason. I'm a coalition builder, and they know that I'm going to be tough but fair, and that I'm the most qualified to run the DA's office. So I'm proud of those endorsements, and I think it shows that I can bring people together and not be a divisive candidate. And quite frankly, you can call yourself a reformer all you want. You haven't done anything to reform beyond be a criminal defense lawyer, and you haven't brought people together in any kind of meaningful way, and you have no management experience. That's the difference about my candidacy. And look, I really don't want to make this about him, but it's really about what I've done in terms of my record and my career, and that's clear. They can try to paint that any way they want, but I got to tell you, our FOP is not just its union leadership. That's how he thinks of it. It's our, the FOP that I know is the rank and file officers who many of them risk their lives every day to work in the city of Philadelphia to keep us safe. And I've worked with them over the years. I've stood behind those caskets at the funerals as managing director. That means I'm going to hold them accountable, by the way, when they make mistakes, because the worst thing is somebody who violates that trust. And I don't like bullies, even if they have badges, especially when they have badges. So I'm going to hold officers who commit bad conduct accountable. But you really can't push the kind of reforms that you need in the DA's office and in the police department unless you have the credibility and the respect to push them into those reforms and to work with them to do that. And that's what I hope to do.
Rich, you keep talking on the campaign trail about your managerial experience and how that really separates you from all the candidates in the field. So my question is to you is how will your managerial experience from working with AMARC and managing the city of Philadelphia translate into the Philly DA office?
Yeah, so a lot of folks don't think about this too much, but the DA's office isn't really just about being a good lawyer. It's about being a manager. It's an administrative job. You've got 650,000 employees. You've got to conduct and have strong management skills and good HR practices. None of the other candidates have done that, right? They've all been attorneys or they've run a small solo law practice. I haven't done that. I've run large organizations, member of the Executive Leadership Council in the private sector, where I had 70,000 employees. And then obviously as managing director, I had 30,000 employees under my charge in the city of Philadelphia. And when we just conducted great practices, we had Philly Stat, we did operational reviews, we professionalized hiring and how we treated our employees. You can see the example in the DA's office. You don't hire people with misogynistic and racist emails and promote them and put them in charge of people in your office and then give them sensitivity training when you find out the fiasco. This is not a time for inexperienced leadership. We have an office that's in crisis. We have a White House that is declaring war on local sanctuary cities like us. We need a district attorney who is ready to lead, ready to fight, who has the credibility and the relationships to manage that office on a daily basis, but more importantly, to be a real leader of an organization. And I've done that. Nobody else in this race has that experience.
Joining us on WHIP radio right now is Rich Negrin, one of the 7 Democratic candidates in the Democratic primary, which takes place next month. May 16th is the date here in the city of Philadelphia. Rich, you just mentioned a point I wanted to get to in this interview. And it's about the sanctuary status of the city of Philadelphia. We know that Donald Trump, obviously Attorney General Jeff Sessions, even we have representatives in the city of Philadelphia. State Rep Martina White proposed a bill kind of trying to take away the status of Philadelphia sanctuary city as a sanctuary city. So I want to ask you, how do you plan on combating that against the federal government?
Yeah, there's a couple ways I think we can do it. First of all, make sure that we push our officers not to become deputized and act as ICE agents, right? Our police should not be asking people about their documented status or their undocumented status, and that's not going to have any place in what we do. So anybody who detains someone or stops someone or tries to arrest someone on the basis of minor offenses and on their status, we're going to be have to do that. We're required to do that by law. But just the ICE detainers in and of themselves for minor offenses, we're not going to honor those things. And the DA's office can work hard to partner to not be a part of that partnership and make sure that, A, we're not sharing information, we're not making it as easy as possible for ICE to kind of do their thing. And that's the thing, the DA has an incredibly important role. But also as an advocate, right, we need to be an important voice on the issue and tell the truth. If you look at the real data, unlike all the rhetoric coming out of Washington or Harrisburg, sanctuary cities are actually safer. The evidence and the facts show us that they're more stable, families are more stable, the economies are more stable, and crime rates are actually lower. And the people need to understand that.
So again, Mike, so you brought it seems that you're very adamant on standing firm that you want Philadelphia to stay as a sanctuary city. What do you think? What do you say to those Democrats? Because I think for the most part, most Democrats and progressives are for the sanctuary city status of Philadelphia. But I think there are some Democrats that are still on board to them. What do you make of them? Do you think they're real progressives?
Yeah, I do. People can disagree on this issue, but look, I'm the son of immigrants, and Philadelphia needs to stand for the belief in the American dream, and that dream needs to be alive today, just like it was for all of our ancestors and our families. And here's the thing: this isn't about releasing violent offenders. People who have violent, who are violent offenders are usually going to have a judicial warrant hold, asking for their hold. This isn't about releasing dangerous criminals into the street. That's a false narrative. That's part of the rhetoric kind of coming out of D.C. The overwhelming, extreme majority of undocumented folks are not murderers and rapists. That's a bold-faced lie. They actually commit crimes at a lower rate than the general population, and folks need to understand that. And so a part of it is, I think, is education and making sure that the fear-mongering doesn't take place, and folks like us standing firm, and Philadelphia should be ground zero for this conversation.
Rich, last night you brought up the very humbling and sad story about your father's sudden death as he was gunned down by a MAC-10 in front of you. As DA, will you work to get rid of these weapons and get them off the street, and how will you get them off the street and protect our communities?
Yeah, so that's really, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, it's obviously something I talk about because it's a big part of the motivation for why I'm running. We need to do something about guns, and public safety is still the number one concern that we have here, and that should be for the DA. It's funny, I'm one of the few candidates who actually sounds like a prosecutor and is talking about public safety and keeping our children safe. I lost my dad, to a machine gun shooting when I was just 13, when a drive-by shooting when he and I were getting in the car. That gun is still available right now on the internet. So I was on the board of Ceasefire, so I support all the common sense gun reform efforts, whether it's lost and stolen, the reporting of lost and stolen, whether it's extended magazines, whether it's universal background checks, whether it's the assault weapons ban. We really need to make a difference around limiting the ability of guns to get in the wrong hands in our cities, and especially here in Philadelphia.
Joining us.
But here's the other thing, and I talked about this a little bit. The best kind of gun control is giving our kids in our communities, the hope and the empowerment that they need to not want to pick up that gun to begin with. So I really hope to do that through a community-based model in the DA's office, where every single employee is a big brother or a big sister, where every employee helps to adopt a neighborhood and to work in our communities, to be proactive, to have our young people engaged in making a difference and not becoming a part of the problem, but a part of the solution. And that's the best kind of gun control. But I hope to do all those things as district attorney to help make a difference in our young people's lives, much in the way I was impacted by it when I was young.
Joining us on WHIP Radio right now is Rich Negrin, one of the 7 Democratic candidates in the field for district attorney. That primary is taking place next month. May 16th is the date to vote in that primary. Rich, again, to kind of piggyback on Gino's question there, continue about gun violence. So do you think the city of Philadelphia has made progress in the past decade or so in how we've dealt with these issues? Because I remember, again, at the town hall, you spoke specifically of a story that stuck with me as well when you mentioned a 4-year-old, I believe it was, being shot at a block party. And you said that no one came forward of saying who was the one who committed or who did the shooting. No one came forward. So I'm curious, how do you improve the community and police relations in scenarios like that to trim down on gun violence?
So I've actually done this, right, through through the neighborhood initiative, Philly Rising, we worked in 25 of our most violent neighborhoods in the city. And really it was about being continuously present. We had coordinators in every community who weren't just there periodically, who weren't just there now and then at a community meeting, but who were actually working and doing service projects and helping to improve quality of life and working with the key stakeholders. We used to call them neighborhood heroes, but it's those block captains, those 311 liaisons, those community leaders and pastors and principals who are just active in the community and care about it. And we can do this in every neighborhood in the city where we have DA reps who are a part of that effort. The DA can't do it by themselves, but we know that we can rebuild trust because I've seen it happen in dangerous neighborhoods where everybody has, the police captain's cell phone and where police are an important part of the conversation, the DA's office are an important part of those conversations, and you slowly rebuild trust over time as you rebuild playgrounds, as you rebuild and take back streets and do cleanups and shut down, drug houses and violent drug corners. You can do all those things together to start to turn around quality of life. While I was managing director, we dropped violent crime by nearly 50% over those years. When I first came into the job, CNN was calling us Philadelphia, and that's much better today. But it needs to continue, and we need to stop the trend that we're seeing a slight uptick right now in our homicides because we had turned the other way for so long. We want to make sure that we rebuild the trust and start improving the clearance rate around those homicides to make sure that our victims are getting justice.
Last question here for Rich Negrin, candidate for Philadelphia District Attorney, one of the 7 Democrats in the field. Rich, in your last answer, you talked about shutting down drug houses, and one of the things that's been talked about pretty at a great deal with in this specific primary is the dealing with civil asset forfeiture. And in an interview with Holly Otterbein of Philly Mag, you said you, quote, want to totally retool it. Can you please expand on what you exactly want to do with civil asset forfeiture?
Yeah, so today, there's a bit of an injustice that can happen because the system, the way it operates, is incredibly aggressive. And we all hear the story about, the grandmother who's potentially losing her house because her grandson was selling a bag of weed on the front steps. And, to me, that's not just an operational failure. It's really a moral failure, right? The DA's office needs to be in the business of justice. And any injustice, no matter how small or whether it's on the civil side, is an injustice that the DA's office should not be participating in. I think whether it's requiring a conviction so there's a direct connection or a nexus between the forfeiture and the taking of a home and criminal activity, or whether it's trying to see whether we can get them a right to the counsel right now. People who walk into court and go up against the DA's office, go up against the city solicitor and a DA and don't really have counsel on the other side. But we need to do what we can to make sure that there's a direct connection between criminal activity and the taking of something as important as someone's home. We can't be a part of an injustice where we're doing that in an aggressive manner that just makes no sense. We're the national model, actually, here in Philadelphia for how to do civil forfeiture wrong. People talk about us at national conferences around how it's done in Philadelphia. So we need to look at our best practices around the country. We need to be smarter around how we do that just to be more just and more fair. And I think removing the profit motive from forfeiture so that the DA's office isn't incentivized to do that is a good start where we can start to rehabilitate and return some of those properties that are directly connected to criminal activity back into the community with nonprofits and victims groups and organizations that can help improve a neighborhood, not just help the DA's office make a profit.
I'm sorry, quickly, one more point, because you touched on something on that last answer about how Philadelphia is like a model of something doing it wrong. In your campaign ad, you stated that Philadelphia should have the most thriving progressive district attorney's office in the entire country, and we don't. Is there a specific city you want to kind of model the DA's office after that you think is the most progressive in the country?
Yeah, so there are several that I am tired of hearing about, right? Brooklyn, San Diego, Dallas has done some good things with Open File, which is a new way of doing discovery and sharing information. There are a lot of cities out there, those are just to name a few, that are these sort of national models around criminal justice reform and conviction review units and open data. Philadelphia needs to be driving that conversation. If we're going to reduce mass incarceration, if we're going to be tough on violent offenders but smarter on nonviolent offenders, and stop criminalizing poverty, stop the country. And 5 years later, we were named #1 digital city, based on a lot of the work and the national search that I did to bring in a great CIO and really retool our efforts around innovation, and created the first municipal innovation lab in the entire country. So I want to bring that level of innovation and reform to the DA's office and do the same thing. Take us from an antiquated system to one of the most progressive, reform-minded, innovative departments in the entire country.
There it is. Rich Negrin, one of the 7 Democratic candidates in the field for district attorney, that primary next month, May 16th. Rich, thank you so much for joining us here on WHIP Radio, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
My pleasure, guys.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you very much. Anytime.